Right. I'm Susan Wilson, and I am the house historian at the Omni Parker House.
So what inspired you to become interested in history?
I was interested in history since I was a kid. I didn't grow up in Boston, unlike everybody else. I grew up in New Jersey, and the town next to where I grew up was Morristown, and Washington's headquarters were there, and also Jockey Hollow Park, which is where they stayed the summer before Valley Forge. And therefore I had to end up in a place where Washington had another headquarters, so I ended up in Cambridge. But I just loved history since I was a kid, and I considered myself a history major even in high school, and then I did in college and graduate school. I majored in history.
So what about Boston history in particular has really inspired you?
I actually left history for several years because I discovered when I was in grad school that there were no teaching positions, and I was supposed to become a professor. And so I picked up my hobby of photography and ended up getting many more jobs as a photographer than as a historian. And I worked for a variety of Boston newspapers because I knew how to write and I knew how to photograph. And I was working for this local newspaper called the Boston Globe. And in the middle of my working for them and doing arts and culture and other kinds of writing and photography, because I was a twofer, I would go out and take the pictures and write the story, my editor said, "Susan, didn't you used to write about Boston history? Or didn't you used to be interested in history?" And I said, "Yeah, I asked my parents, I have several degrees that I'm not using." And she said, "Why don't you write a history column about Boston?" And so the short story is we invented this history column, and I would write a big feature once a month, and I would go to some particular historic site in Boston, and the Parker House was one of those. And so that was back in 1992, and I ended up writing that column for 6 years. It ended up being my first book, which was called, of all things, Boston Sights and Insights. And that's when I got to know the Parker House intimately. Now, I had been here before. As a kid, my mom made Parker House rolls, and it was a big deal. And also when I was in college in the area at Tufts over in Medford, and we used to come and drink here on Sundays. There would be a huge, in Parker's restaurant, they would have a huge fountain filled with tomato juice, and then at noontime, because it was Sunday and we had blue laws, they would fill it with vodka, and we would have Bloody Marys. And it was just a wonderful, exciting thing. So.